let's start with our motivation. Really appreciating being alive, having human intelligence, having met the Dharma, and having all the circumstances to hear the Dharma and think about it, meditate on it. And thinking of the meaning and purpose of our life in terms of preparing for future lives, attaining liberation and full awakening, and also making our lives meaningful moment by practicing the thought training. And so having this perspective on what our life is about, what the meaning of our life is, what we can do with this life, is very important, so we don't just take our life for granted and take our opportunities for granted, but really see how precious they are and how difficult they are to come by. And so in that way, being able to turn our mind to the Dharma and make our lives meaningful. Okay, so our minds aren't going to turn to the Dharma by themselves. We have to see the benefit of doing so. We have to understand in our hearts the reason for doing so. And when we do, then our mind automatically will go towards the Dharma. So we need to create those causes, and by reflecting on our human life, its conditions, its purpose and value, the rarity of having it, and so on, so that we can really form a deep interest in the Dharma and train our mind, make our mind interested in practicing. And so when we think of the meaning and purpose of our life, and we think of attaining full awakening, it may seem like rather far away and complicated and a little mysterious or maybe incomprehensible to us now. But if we break it down a little bit and start thinking about what it might be like to have spiritual realizations, to be able to relate to other beings with impartiality, to be able to look at other things and see how they're dependent. When we begin to really ask ourselves, well, what are the results of just cherishing myself and disregarding others, and what are the benefits of turning my mind to the welfare of others by considering that they want happiness as much as I do, and that they've been kind to me. And okay, so, familiarizing our mind with all these different kind of ideas again and again, and that way leading our mind in the right direction and making our lives meaningful, not only by generating bodhicitta, but also by generating the wisdom realizing reality. And when we have that vision of what our life means and what it could do, then there's an automatic sense of joy and enthusiasm in our hearts. Let's take a moment to cultivate that as our motivation this evening. Okay. So did you have, how many, up to what chapter did you do the review?
6.
6. So chapter 7 still needs to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be done the next time I'm missing. Okay? So we'll start with chapter 8. I had done the first few verses in chapter 8 last time, but I think it's good if we go through them again, and because we weren't very far into that chapter. Okay, so chapter 8 is showing the methods of fully training the student's mind stream, making it receptive to the development of spiritual paths. Okay, so we spent a long time kind of seeing our misconceptions with the first 4 chapters, and then in the 5, 6, and 7, really understanding the possibility of awakening, the workings of the afflictions, and why it's important to get rid of them. And so here, showing the methods of fully training the student's mind stream, making it receptive to the development of spiritual paths. Okay, and then in chapter 9 onwards, we're going to be going into the wisdom section, which are the spiritual paths in particular that we're going to want to generate. Okay, people look a bit puzzled. Have you? Yeah, you know where we're at? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, verse 176 talks about why afflictions can be abandoned. So somebody, our friend Joe Blow, is asking, how do we escape from the bondage of desire, which we've been accustomed to since beginningless time? Good question, huh? We've been in samsara from beginningless time. How in the world are we going to get ourselves out when we're so used to it? So Aryadeva says, just as friendship between people who disagree does not last long, desire does not last long when all things false are recognized. Okay, so we might have been very familiar with desire and attachment, yeah. But when we see its faults, then our interest in following it is going to go way down, in the same way that when we have a friendship with somebody and we don't get along with that person, how the wish to hang around them, goes way down. Okay? So, a friendship that's motivated by desire between people who don't get along and who disagree is not lasting long. And so similarly, desire doesn't last long in a trainee who recognizes all the faults of external and internal things that give rise to many unwanted consequences. So external things mean like things that aren't related to consciousness, and internal means things that are related to consciousness. Okay, so features of living beings. And so when we, start to see the faults of these things, like following objects of senses, being mesmerized by external objects, yeah, then we're going to lose interest in continuing to live that way. Okay? And so when we look around, we can really see how we're completely transfixed and hooked on things external to ourselves. Aren't we? From the moment we wake up in the morning, it's always outward directed. Yeah? Oh, what is that? Is it going to, give me pleasure? Is it going to give me pain? What's that other person doing? Why are they doing that? Yeah, what can I get? Will I be famous? Will I be liked? So the mind constantly directed outward and completely out of touch with what's going on side here, you know. So sense objects just totally control us, you know. So that's why it's called the desire realm. Yeah, because we're just transfixed and desire sense objects. Okay, so when we can really investigate the fault of this kind of attachment, then our interest in following it goes down. And you know, in that way we can see that the root of attachment is unstable, and something that's unstable we can get rid of. Oh, should I? I'm just going to go on, okay? Yeah. We're having trouble with the phone. Okay, so verse 177 is about afflictions can be abandoned because their focal object, their basis, is not definite, yeah, or definitive. So Aryadeva says, some are attracted to it, some have aversion to it, some feel confused by it. Thus desire has no object. So what it's getting at here is that desire arises for what we personally see as an attractive or desirable object. Okay. However, what we see as attractive and desirable is not necessarily what other people see as attractive and desirable. So some are attracted to some object. Other people can't stand it. And a third group of people are confused by it. Okay. So you might take you know, some person that you're attached to that you think is just like, wow, this person is fantastic. They are so attractive. I really want to be with them. Somebody else looks at that person and says, ugh, you know, I can't stand their personality. They're not physically very attractive at all. And then a third group of people just look at the person and they're totally confused by that person. Like, what in the world is this person doing? I don't get them. Okay? So it's quite interesting how on one person different people can have such different reactions, and that produce very different emotional responses. And so that's just showing that the object of attachment is not something fixed, it's not definitive, because not everybody sees, you know, that other person that we're attached to as attractive and desirable and is attached to them. Yeah? And this is really something to think of, you know, when your romantic relationship falls apart and you're saying, I can't live without him, and then you realize that everybody else in the world lives perfectly well without them. You know, and if they were really so fantastic, the whole world would collapse because nobody would be able to live well without this person. But, you know, lots of people look at the person we think is really fantastic and say, what a boring guy, or what a disagreeable person. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? You know, of course, when we're attracted to somebody, we don't even see that other people don't like that person because we think they have no faults. And if other people don't like them, that is just because they're stupid. Yeah? Which shows how stupid we are. Okay, so if, you know, and this can apply equally well to, you know, if you want fame and attention. Somebody just may want, I want attention, I want to be famous, I want my name to be known, and da-da-da-da-da. And somebody else may look at that and say, I don't want that at all. You know, I like my privacy. I don't want the whole world to know about me. And a third group of people may look at fame and popularity and say, I don't know, and be kind of confused and dumbfounded about it. Okay? So it's just showing that things don't exist from their own side as inherently desirable, inherently undesirable, or inherently, in between. Yeah. That how things are depends so much, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We say that a lot, but we don't really believe it. Yeah? And so when we're attracted to something, we really think that those good qualities are there in that object, in that person, in that situation. We don't see that it's our mind constructing that and making it into what it is. But when you stop and look and examine, then it becomes much clearer that, things don't exist from their own side as attractive or as despicable. Because we'll go to the other extreme as well, and find some other person or some other thing as just totally horrible, unbearable. And other people think it's fine. They don't have any problem at all. Yeah? And you can watch your mind, like when you're in retreat and somebody's clicking their mala in the meditation hall. Click, 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 click. And you find yourself, you can feel the energy in your body getting really tense, and I'm gonna clobber that person. Who do they think they are, clicking their mala and disturbing my meditation? As if this was the worst thing happening in the whole universe. Again, we're totally this is awful. Yeah? And somebody else in the hall doesn't even notice it. Yeah? And somebody else in the hall, thinks, oh, what a pleasant sound that is. Yeah? It's true, isn't it? Somebody says something, somebody in the community says something, we go, ah! How can they even think like that? As if it's just horrible. How can this person think that, those kind of chairs are, something we could even have here. Don't even think like that. And then somebody else thinks, wow, these are really nice chairs. We should fill the hall with them. And somebody else is going, what's the story? What are they going on? Yeah? Okay? But from each of our point of view, we think that the way we see it is how it is objectively out there. Yeah? But if it were that way, everybody would see it the same way. And people don't. Yeah? So the object of our attachment, the object of our hatred or of our jealousy or whatever, is totally, something that's flexible and made up by the mind. Okay? So, if things existed from their own side, they would only provoke one unified emotional response, but they don't. Okay? And so that indicates that things are only imputed by conceptuality. Yeah? And that the objects of desire don't exist from their own side. nor do the objects of anger. Okay? So therefore, from the viewpoint of their basis, in other words, the object, afflictions can be eliminated because those objects, don't exist from their own side, and they're completely, when you examine, they're like mush. Yeah? It's interesting to think about, isn't it? Yeah? So spend some time thinking about that and really making many, many examples in your life. How you flip out, over something that somebody else thinks is fine. And why is that? Why does that happen? And we're totally locked on something, have to have something that another person is disinterested in. And why is that? What is that object that it provokes such different responses? Yeah, does that object have any beauty or attraction from its own side? What is that object? Where is the beauty, or where is the disgusting stuff? Okay? So instead of, wasting our time always responding to the external world, to spend some time questioning, why do I respond in this way? What is this object really? And does my response to it have anything to do with how it actually exists? Really interesting when we do this. Yeah, very humbling. So verse 178. So the 177 was the afflictions can be abandoned because the object is not definite. It can be object of desire, attachment, or whatever. This one is that afflictions can be abandoned because their causes don't truly exist. Okay, the causes of afflictions are not something cast in concrete. Okay, so Aryadeva says, apart from conceptuality, desire and so forth have no existence. Who with intelligence would hold there are real things imputed by conceptuality? Okay, so apart from conceptuality, desire and so forth have no existence. So what this is getting at is, that afflictions can be abandoned not only because their objects don't truly exist, but also because their causes don't truly exist. Okay? And the afflictions cannot be found apart from the conceptualization process of the inappropriate attention. Remember when we studied low rig, mind and awareness? There was this one mental factor, attention, that sometimes, is called inappropriate attention because it makes up stories about objects. Okay? So it's our inappropriate attention that sees impermanent things as permanent, that sees things that are foul by nature as beautiful, that sees things that are unsatisfactory by nature as pleasurable, that sees things that lack a self as having a self. Okay? And so this inappropriate attention is conceptuality at its complete worst, in the sense of just making up things that don't exist and believing that they do exist. Yeah? And this is exactly what our mind is doing so often. Yeah, and we have no clue at all that we're doing it. Instead, we totally believe, yeah, that how things appear to our mind is how they actually exist. Yeah, and yet our mind is making up stuff like mad, exaggerating qualities of things just all the time. Okay, so when we have a lot of attachment to something, it seems like it's permanent. It's never going to change. It's always going to be that way. Therefore, I have to have it, or if it's something I don't like, I have to destroy it. Yeah, we're never in. How often are we in a situation where we sit and we say, this is unpleasant, but it's not going to last for long? Yeah? Do we even think that? Or just, something unpleasant is just, we think going to last forever. So therefore we have to scream about it now, immediately, and make it end. Okay? And similarly, something that is unpleasant is something that is pleasant is also permanent. So we've got to hang on to it, because it's going to make us always happy. And yet, no. Yeah? Or we attach the word mine to something. Yeah? This is my glass case. By the way, do you notice that I have new glasses? Somebody told me that I look very distinguished in them.
I like how they extend.
Yes, do you like this? I mean, is this fancy or not?
It's very cool.
Look like this. Then you go like this. And you bend them in like this, and then you put them in this itty-bitty glass case. And this is mine.
Don't get attached to it.
What do you think about that? Not only are the glasses cool, but I'm cool, because I'm the owner of the glasses. I'm the one who wears the glasses. They're mine.
Small suffering. It's going to get bigger.
What?
It's small suffering right now.
It's going to get bigger.
Got enough moving parts that things might happen.
And how long are those lenses going to work?
Forever. My eyes are never going to change. Because after all, it's the lettering that keeps shrinking, not my eyes that get worse. Okay? So as soon as the label mine is put on something, it has whole new meaning and significance in the world. Yeah? And so we just look at what we put the word mine to. It could be an object, my blankie. Like, remember when you're a little kid and you have your blankie? Yeah? And if anybody took your blankie, you wailed. Huh? Yeah. Blankie is slang. Sorry. How little kids have blankets and you hold your blanket and suck your thumb? Yeah, so we call it a blankie. Yeah. And then you wail when your blankie disappears, don't you? Yeah? And then we think, oh, those children are so silly. But then adults do the same thing. You're attached to your car and your car disappears and Okay? We're attached to our ideas. In a group of people, we volunteer an idea, and not everybody thinks it's the best idea, and we're like so prickly, But this is my idea. It's a good idea. Why don't you listen to me? Nobody understands me. Nobody trusts me. This is my idea. All it is an idea. What in the world is an idea? What about an idea is mine? And yet we get so attached to our ideas, don't we? Somebody doesn't like them? Yeah? Oh, we're so offended. Feel so disregarded. But what in the world is it that we're attached to? Really kind of nutty, isn't it? Okay? So, we see with, inappropriate attention how we're fooled all the time, that this conceptuality just fools us because it imputes things on objects and then believes that to be true. Yeah, so not only do we impute attractiveness or disgustingness, yeah, but impermanence, permanence and so on. And self, this has its own nature. Okay? So here we're talking about, they always give the example like a snake imputed on a rope. Yeah, it's a good example. On a rope, the example is there's a coiled rope and it's kind of dark so you can't see very clearly. So you look and you go, snake! It's the snake! And we totally run away screaming. In fact, it's a rope. Yeah? And there is nothing about that rope that is a snake. Nothing. You can look completely. You take that rope apart. You look in its parts. You look in everything about that. The parts of the rope, the whole rope, the length of the rope, everything. You cannot find a snake. Yeah, it's totally made up by our mind. Yeah, and yet we believe it, and we react to it, and we freak out. Yeah. One time we were having this example from Geshe Zopa, and at lunchtime I was walking around the stupa and something slithered in the grass. And one person said, "Oh, it's a snake." And somebody said, "No, it's a rope." It was a snake, actually. Yeah. But on the basis of the snake, again, you can't find anything that's a rope either. Yeah. Try using a snake to tie your package. Okay. So what it's getting at is that things' existence is dependent. Yeah. It's dependent on conceptuality. How we label something influences what it is. So things don't have their own existence from their own side, but they depend, what they are depends on what we label them. Okay? So, I think antiques is such a good example of this. There's some antique something, and one person looks at it and goes, "Wow, this is worth, $5,000, $5 million. And another person looks at it and goes, "This piece of junk, get it out of here." Yeah? So is it a valuable antique or is it a piece of junk? It depends what you label it. Yeah? Huh? Or if, have you ever had something where somebody has given you some object that they consider very beautiful that you just see as like, nah, and you use it for something, and then they come in and go, but, you know, that was this, you know, fantastic stone that I found when I was hiking in Yosemite, and you're using it as a doorstop. You know, that's not a doorstop, that's a beautiful stone, or, you know, whatever it is. Okay? Yeah. So how, you know, things have meaning also according to how we label them. And people have functions. Things have functions also according to how we label them. Yeah. When you look at, remember the whole, I like to call it the Gush-Bohr election. You know, it's the Bush-Gore, but it's the Gush-Bohr.
Does it mean something, Gush-Bohr?
You know how sometimes you mix the letters up on something?
But maybe it has a meaning in English, a gush. Does it mean something?
Well, gush, yeah, gush has a meaning.
What does it mean?
Gush means, gushy means like...
Sticky?
Pile of mess.
Yeah, kind of. It's sticky and messy. Okay. And bore is like boring. Okay. So the Gush-Bohr election, you know, and then the Supreme Court went through this whole thing, yeah, about, you know, who's going to be the president and which ballots are valid and what the hanging chads, and, you know, are the people in Florida capable anyway of telling this ballot, because it was apparently a very confusing ballot, and, you know, did they count it correctly, and who's going to be president, and this whole uproar. And basically what is disturbing everybody is the label to give a person. Yeah? Yeah, there's Al Gore and George Bush. And, you know, and we have this label, president, and who are we going to put it on? Yeah? It's like, well, which one gets this label? And that label has a lot of power attached to it, but it's basically just a label, isn't it? President. Yeah? But you can see neither one of them was a president from their own side. Yeah, because if they were, it would have been very clear without having this whole uproar and going to the Supreme Court. Yeah. Yeah, I remember Lama Zopa commented once that most court cases are people arguing about labels. Yeah? Guilty, not guilty. Yeah? Somebody,
Manslaughter, murder.
Yeah, manslaughter, murder, innocent. Yeah? So all these court cases, people are arguing about labels. Yeah? And then once that label goes on, yeah, before that label goes on, you know, you can say anything you want to. After that label goes on, yeah, then you can't. Like, I made a comment in one talk about Zimmerman murdering Trayvon Martin, and some people wrote me and said, you cannot say that because he was acquitted. And that's slander saying that.
He actually came to this weekend's sharing the Dharma.
Pardon?
The gentleman came back and came to this
Oh, he
weekend's sharing
came.
the Dharma.
Yeah.
He said,
Okay.
"Oh,
Yeah, I mean, because somebody who was a lawyer, said you can't really say that. Yeah. So it's amazing just, the power of a label, and how once that label is existing, we forget we gave it that label and think it now exists that way from its own side, and so has to be regarded in that way by everybody. Otherwise, you're going to get sued for libel. Incredible, isn't it? Yeah. So Aryadeva said, or actually Gyaltsabje said, if things did exist from their own side, someone with intelligence would not hold that they are imputed by conceptuality, which is the opposite of existing from its own side. Okay? So existing from its own side and being imputed by conceptuality, both of those things cannot go on the same object. Okay? Because existing from its own side means it exists independent of all other objects and all other factors and causes or names, labels, anything. It exists as that from its own side. Okay? Whereas imputed by conceptuality, imputed means, kind of giving a name by conceptuality, so the mind that conceives and has a name for something. Okay? So those two things are opposite. Something cannot exist in both ways. And if we examine and see, which way is the way things exist, we see actually things are imputed by conceptuality. They don't exist from their own side. Yeah? I mean, because if they did, we would have known who was president before. Yeah? Even before the election, when they were born, we would have known that that one was president.
President Bush.
Yeah, no, President Moore. President Boring Gush. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so when a snake is imputed to a rope, neither the parts of the rope nor that which possesses the rope, or the collection of the parts, or the continuum of the rope, or that which possesses the continuum, none of those things, no way anywhere on a rope is there a snake. Yeah? So similarly, the collection of aggregates that we think is a person, when you examine that collection of aggregates and the aggregates individually, no way, nowhere do you find a person. Yeah? There's a body, there's feelings, there's discriminations, there's a grab bag of conditioned factors or volitional factors, there's consciousness. Yeah? And nowhere in that collection or in any of the things individually or in their continuum is there a person. And yet, when we look at each other, we think that there's a real person inside. And when we look at ourselves, there's a real person here. Yeah? When you think of yourself, do you think that there's only 5 aggregates sitting here? No. There's not 5 aggregates sitting here. There's me. Okay? I mean, so naturally, so forcefully. How could anyone question that? There's me. Yeah? But when you look, just as with trying to find a snake on a rope, you cannot find a person in the aggregates. Nowhere. Yeah? Okay, so here we see that the person, yeah, exists by being imputed by conceptuality. You have these aggregates and you impute person to it. And then what's especially interesting is when you impute I and you. Yeah? Here's one group of aggregates and you impute I, and another group of aggregates and you impute you, and all of a sudden these things take on totally different meanings, don't they? Yeah? To the collection of aggregates that you impute I, all of a sudden, wow, those aggregates are really important. We've got to protect them. That body can't be damaged, those feelings can't be hurt, those opinions can't be disagreed with, those consciousnesses are never wrong, you know. But then another collection of aggregates that we label you, not so important. Yeah, really not so important. Yeah. And it's interesting, why do we label one set of aggregates I and another set of aggregates you? And we think I, the one we label I, this one, is just inherently I. But again, if it were, then everybody would look here and say I. But everybody doesn't. I'm the only one who does. All of you look here and say you. I look here and go, I. Okay? And then we fight, don't we? Because you don't regard me the way I think I should be regarded. Because I am I. And you are you. Not so important. Yeah? So it's interesting just how imputing, you know, those two words, I and you, makes such a big difference in how we live our lives. Yeah, huge difference. And yet, you know, once we impute I, we think that there's really something in there that's I. Yeah. And this is what one of the things Shantideva questions in chapter 8 of Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. You know, why do you call this collection I? Yeah. And so I remember, you know, saying to Lama Yeshe, well, it's natural because I feel the feelings of this collection. Yeah? When somebody goes like this, I feel it. So of course this is mine, this is me, this is I, it's my. Yeah? Of course, because I feel it. But who's the I that feels it? Yeah? Can you find some separate I there that feels this? I mean, who exactly is feeling that? It's a good question, isn't it?
That's the difference between an animal was reacting instinctively, right? So human beings are able to think through that to overcome instincts, like protecting their own race or something.
Yeah, well this is, the you know, like you bring up how animals instinctively, you know, protect their body and how they instinctively protect their young. This is showing the depth of grasping at true existence. Yeah, just how innate and automatic it is.
Yeah, and that shows how much potential in a human being is through using reasoning, for example. Using the mind to think through how things really exist. As an animal can't do that. One animal can't do that.
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting, isn't it? The difference. Once we give something a label, what happens to it? Okay. So, what this verse is talking about here is, let's go on a little bit and then I'll come back to that. So both the snake and the person are merely designated to a basis of designation. Yeah, the collection of whatever it is. And both are unfindable under analysis. So when you analyze and you try and find either the snake or the person, you can't find the snake in the in the rope. You can't find the person in the aggregates. Okay, so they're both designated. They're both unfindable when searched for. However, there's a difference between them, because for a snake, the fact that you can't find the snake on the rope indicates that there's no snake whatsoever. Whereas the fact that you can't find the person on the aggregates does not indicate that there's no person whatsoever. So there's a difference there. So then we have to ask, what's that difference? If both of them are unfindable when searched for, why is one non-existent and one existent?
Because the rope doesn't function like a snake.
Yeah, because a rope doesn't function as a snake, but a collection of aggregates can function like a person. Okay? So, for the person, unfindability doesn't imply non-existence. So the fact is, when you're searching with ultimate analysis, okay, that's when you're searching to find and see if the thing labeled exists in the basis. The fact that you cannot find that object in the basis when you're searching with ultimate analysis does not influence whether the object conventionally exists or not. Okay, so whether it's a snake labeled on a rope or a person labeled on the aggregates, the unfindability, when analyzed, looking ultimately, what is this thing? That unfindability does not affect whether that thing is existing on the conventional level. This is quite important, because some people think that if you can't find it when you look with ultimate analysis, that then it is totally non-existent. So they would say that the rope, the example of the snake on the rope and the person on the aggregates are the same, and they would say just as the snake doesn't exist, the person also is non-existent. And that's wrong, because a person does conventionally exist. It can do things, it can function. Okay? So the unfindability on an ultimate level does not necessarily indicate non-existence on the conventional level. Okay? Because, when no analysis is made, the person designated on independence on the collection of aggregates can function. But even when no analysis is made, the snake designated in dependence on a rope cannot function as a snake. Okay, you with me? This is actually quite an important point. Yeah? So all phenomena are imputed by conceptuality, But not everything imputed by conceptuality exists. Or say it in other words, all phenomena are imputed by conceptuality. Yeah. And every phenomena, a phenomena is synonymous with existence. So all phenomena are imputed by conceptuality. But not everything that is imputed by conceptuality is a phenomena. Not everything imputed by conceptuality exists. Okay? So when you look at the scarecrow in Mike and Sally's field and you think it's a person, that doesn't make it a person. Yeah. And when you think, rat poison is elixir, that doesn't mean that it's elixir. You're still going to get sick. And if you think karma doesn't exist, that doesn't make karma non-existent. Yeah, some people think, well, if I don't believe in karma, then I don't create karma and I don't experience the result of karma. No, that's not true. Okay. Okay, so what we're getting at with this verse is that afflictions are dependent on an inappropriate attention. So that fact makes them, the afflictions, not exist by their own, from their own side, because they're dependent on, causes. Here in particular, the inappropriate attention. So that's one reason. Yeah, and inappropriate attention is erroneous. Yeah, so anything that arises due to something that's mistaken, something that's erroneous, is not going to exist the way it appears to. Yeah, and we spent the first 4 chapters of the book negating, why inappropriate attention is erroneous. Okay, so then there's a verse in the 60 stanzas of reasoning by Nagarjuna. Okay, so it says, the world is caused by ignorance. The fully awakened one said so. Therefore, why is it not feasible to say the world is conceptuality? Okay, so the world is caused by ignorance. The fully awakened one said so. That's talking about causal dependence. That ignorance is the first link, and it produces compositional factors that produces consciousness and so on through the 12 links of dependent arising. That's looking at causal dependence. Okay, but then when he says, therefore, why isn't it feasible to say that the world is conceptuality? That's talking about the fact that everything exists dependent on name and concept. Okay, so the world is caused by ignorance, which is something that is erroneous, something made up. Ignorance is imputing something on objects. It's imputing a mode of existence that things don't have. So therefore, why can't we say that the world is conceptuality? Because it's all seen through the lenses of ignorance. Okay, so this verse indicates 2 aspects of conceptuality. One is dependence on imputation by conceptuality, which is the whole thing of depending on term and concept. And the other is dependence on causes, among which is inappropriate attention. Okay, so this citation from the 60 stanzas, first emphasizes the causal aspect in the first two lines by saying that the world is caused by ignorance, which is confirmed by the Buddha. And so that's referring to how the polluted aggregates arise due to karma, which arises due to ignorance. Okay? And then the statement that the world is conceptuality includes this causal aspect in that the conceptuality of inappropriate attention causes afflictions. So it's talking about causal dependence. Okay? The inappropriate attention causes afflictions. Afflictions give rise to polluted actions. And through that, the sentient beings and the environment come into existence. Okay, so that's talking about causal dependence. But it also indicates the dependent nature of all phenomena in being merely designations dependent on the conceptual consciousness that designates them. Okay, which is the the first kind of dependence that when we were talking about dependence on imputation by conceptuality. Okay, so ignorance is conceptuality, and it superimposes something that isn't there on objects. Yeah, so it has a causal function, but it also has this function of, giving names and labels. Or actually, it's not so much that ignorance gives the names and labels. That's not so. It's just a conceptual mind that gives the names and labels. But ignorance thinks that the labeled object is that basis of designation. Okay? So that brings us up to where we were last week. I mean, not last week, but last time I taught. Okay, so next time we'll start with 179. Okay. Any questions?
No, I only wanted to mention my comment from before, because your motivation was about precious human life.
Mm-hmm.
So on that, like when I think back how much time I spent not thinking about how reality exists and how animalistic, can you say that? I actually lived my life.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's why human rebirth is so important, because we have a human mind that can think about these things.
Yeah. How much of the time do you think we're really seeing things as they are? I think it's almost...
Well, they say that every consciousness of a sentient being except the meditative equipoise that directly realizes emptiness is mistaken, in the sense that things appear to that mind as truly existent even though they aren't. Okay?
But then slap on top of that inappropriate attention.
Yeah, then we're really way off, aren't we? Yeah? And it's, when you think about it, it's really rather shocking, because we consider ourselves intelligent beings and think of the people around us as intelligent beings. And when you really examine it, we're all way off base, a million miles between us and reality, even though reality exists right here, right now. And so then, when we see that, we respond by generating renunciation, wanting to free ourselves, and we respond with compassion for other sentient beings who are equally as ignorant as us.
And if the analytical meditation is maybe for the beginning a little bit too tough, about emptiness, dependent arising itself, is it appropriate to start with, I think about your explanation about how strongly we are dependent on our senses, and then make our conclusions out of that, and then are the the meditation on the
four distortions.
Helpful, and the establishment of the four mindfulnesses. Are they something you can start that because they are not starting with meditating about the emptiness of phenomena more than with the sense?
Yeah, we need to approach emptiness. That's why the Lam Rim is Lam Rim translates that as stages of the path or steps of the path, that we don't go directly to meditating on emptiness. We start out with things that are easier to understand. So, this whole talk here, start at the beginning of the talk and go through the points in the order they were raised. Don't start at the end of the talk and work backwards. Yeah. Okay, if you're at the bottom of the stairs, take the first step, start with the first step up, not with the last step up. Yeah. Okay, good, and so all those things fit in with the four establishments of mindfulness. Yeah, all these things just are totally interrelated, so that when you meditate on the four establishments of mindfulness, and remember there was a specific one of the four distortions that was associated with each one, even though all the other distortions apply too. And so you meditate on that, and then slowly you can come to think about emptiness on the basis of those four things. Okay, so now my glasses are disappearing into this cool golden case that I'll probably lose. And then my glasses will be lost.